Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a power rankings from myself. I'll be doing these throughout the season, just to give a little bit of background, as I typically do in the intros. This is right off the back of the two seedings. So my power ranking will be it'll be kind of based off of the two groups. So Group A and Group B that just got announced a couple hours ago. Couple maybe an hour ago. Also, a lot of controversy based on the seedings. Definitely agree with all of that. According to, I believe it was Eminem's. It looked like there's a couple like advanced teams that moved up that got ranked above Russian Canadians and Timbermen. And then of course Imperium getting ranked above Secret Club. So not quite sure how exactly they did these seedings, but it is kind of bizarre to see all that. So, I mean, I guess that's besides the point. But just to give you some information, I'll be going through a couple Excel spreadsheets that I'll be keeping updated throughout the season. Trying to keep it up to date as soon as the matches happen. We'll see if I can release them as well. If not, I'll just like post pictures probably like on Fridays or something, whenever I get the chance to do these videos throughout the week. But to start off, I'll just go ahead and throw it over to my Excel sheets so that we can kind of get some background on things. Also, I used a template from somebody. It was someone from Reddit. I can't remember the name, but huge shout out to whoever made the template. It was the only reason I was able to make these things look so nice. And also, of course, HLTV for all of the pictures being easily available on their website. So shout out to you too. Little side notes as well. We've got a couple teams with rosters not fully announced, but I'm just kind of going off of the ESEA pages. So that's kind of the reason why I have some unannounced moves. I don't know if these moves are happening for sure. It's just kind of my guess, because why else would they be on the ESEA roster moments before the season? So kind of my ideas. And again, these rankings very subject to change. I'll be changing them all throughout the season. If moves get announced, I'll be changing them earlier than all throughout the season. If I think like there's a good pickup, if I get any information in the background of like this team's doing well with this player or something like that. So yeah, without further ado, I'll throw it over to the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, because I'll be posting these all week. So thank you all so much for the support, and I will see you soon. So to start things off, we've got Group A here with Premier Season 36. Just gonna kind of run through the teams before I start talking about them. We've got Triumph, High Coast, Rugrats, Secret Club, RBG, Third Impact, Rebirth, Big Chillin', Hates Chess Club, and Imperium Esports. So a lot of these teams can be familiar names. Some of these, I believe, two are new to the scene. So we know of actually 2 through 9, and then Triumph and Imperium are both new teams to Premier. So Triumph, I believe, has accepted the move down. I imagine that that this has already been made with ESEA, although I'm not sure if it's been officially announced. On top of that, their roster is just the roster. I'm basing it off of who's on their ESEA roster. So I believe Cooper, Viz, and 60 haven't been announced yet. So that's a little side note. That's why I put the asterisk there and put the little note on the side. I'm actually gonna take that over there. But to kind of give you some background here, Triumph, obviously the number 1 seed if you look at the team. I mean, maybe not so much obviously. I think it actually could be a pretty close battle between Triumph and High Coast, just because those teams have kind of not played each other a lot, but definitely have played similar competition. Have had some similar success competing against each other. So kind of a close draw here. I just think that the 3 moves being brought up of 60 and Viz and Cooper are going to work really well. That does kind of leave Shake with a huge task, as that's nearly a completely new roster. So huge shout out to Triumph for obviously just continuously putting in the work with new rosters. They've had to go through so much change. On top of that, I believe Penny's no longer in the roster. I'm not sure when that change was made, but I believe on HLTV it still said he was in the roster. This is kind of just my guess that Penny's no longer with Triumph anymore. So that's another little note that you all should take. Maybe that, again, not 100% sure on the full scope of this roster just yet. But with that being said, that kind of covers the reason they're in number 1 seed. I just think they're gonna have a lot of success. But before we get into the whole thing, I do want to say this side of the bracket does look quite a bit harder. I would say that it's got five of the I mean, I don't even know. I would say like maybe 6 or 7 of the top 10 teams in Premier. So you definitely drew the shorter stick if you're being placed in this seeding. I'm not sure if this is subject to change. I imagine it could be. There's a little bit of controversy on Twitter right now as to what the seeding is going to be like in the future. But yeah, this could be subject to change. I'm not 100% sure. Moving on from Triumph, we got High Coast, which is next up. Shout out to High Coast, pretty sick organization. But we got DJ, Ponalone, Rampage, and Binley. And then their final spot, they haven't quite announced a 5th just yet, so we're still waiting on that. That again could probably affect the rankings. I'm not sure if, I mean, they'd have to get a really insane player for their 5th to kind of, for me to put them above Triumph, but they're kind of the reason. I mean, it's very possible that they could kind of overtake Triumph again because of the amount of work that Shake and it has to do to kind of rebuild and get all of these roles set up. It's pretty much a brand new team if the ESEA roster is right. Again, that's a big if. But yeah, that's kind of why I put High Coast. They have a really defined roster. They've got their core 4 and just need to find that last replacement, which I'll be excited to see who joins them. Could possibly move them up, but who knows. Next, we got Rugrats. This is a really interesting roster. This is pretty much brand new. If I'm remembering correctly, like Cobra was on this team previously. I think that's it. As a lot of the moves that have been made, Infinite to Valorant. And then Fang previously playing on this roster at one time, obviously to Extra Salt, which we'll talk about later in the video. But this roster, really cool to see. Cobra specifically, I meant to highlight his name. But Cobra's kind of one of the players that I think has a lot of potential in the scene. Cynic, who previously named Sneaky, now changed his name, has been doing really well lately as well. Jazz Pimp in his old team, X-Recon 5. He was previously playing with Fang, but Jazz Pimp, he really impressed me. That duo of Fang and Jazz Pimp was really impressive to see, even though X-Recon 5 last season didn't have much, if any, success. watching those two play together was a lot of fun in the little times that they did have success. Turismo, I've casted a lot of him in advanced. I feel like he is very talented. His mechanics very strong. And then Twice, who I actually haven't been able to see that much. I don't think I've ever even casted a game of Twice so far. But I mean, obviously he knows how to play because he's been playing in MDL for a long time. So I imagine he'll be able to hold his own with this roster of like four really impressive aimers. So yeah, definitely have high hopes for this roster. For this season, I'm excited to see how they fare. But coming in at fourth is Wolfie, Jitter, Classia, Civ, and Slight, which they just finished their roster with Slight. So excited to see Slight in rocking an MDL now. The reason I put this roster so high up is kind of got the core from last season. You know, they've got minus Wrath and minus Wreck, which those are two heavy hitters. One of those I'll talk about in the next bracket, but super excited to see this team actually be able to continue, especially with the core. We saw some troubles earlier in the week, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they'll not be able to compete. I think they'll be just fine with how they're able to work, as long as they just keep a level head. I don't know. Again, I think that's a key factor. If they're able to keep a level head, if they're able to stay calm and you know, work through their problems, it's a lot easier to do, I feel like, in the season, especially if you have a good start to the season, to kind of mature and gel together. Especially they got Wolfie. I imagine they'll be able to keep a short leash on some of the issues in that roster, and hopefully we'll be able to see players like Classia and Civ kind of overcome that. And I mean, I'm not sure about Civ, but it's kind of the younger players learn how to operate in a more like stable, calm system. The reason I've ranked them so high up is because they have Classia and because they have Civ. Those are two really nuts players. I watched a lot of Civ in advance last season. The dude was kind of crazy. He formerly played for GGPR. I think it was a good move for him to kind of upgrade himself. I know he probably was worried there for a second, but I'm glad that they kind of finished out their issues and are going to play this season. Next up, RBG. This is a roster I feel like can do a good amount of work. Wolfie was at one point on this secret club roster that I talked so fondly about. And honestly, I felt like they had a lot of success with Wolfie on that team before they made the switch Wolfie from Russian Canadians to Secret Club. So they just exchanged Wolfies. But yeah, I think these moves are really good. You've got Walco taking the IGL position. Hit my subscribe button or my YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see that video that I talked a little bit with Walco about how the season or how the off seasons went and trying to get these new players, Chop and Wolfie, and finally being able to round out a roster that's kind of focused on longevity. And whenever I hear that, I've got to give them a little bit of an edge because it kind of has the opposite effect of me like worrying about Secret Club or worrying about a team like Rugrats, where you know these players, they're very talented. There's a possibility that longevity isn't in the picture, either because of move ups or egos or whatever the issue is. But RBG definitely focused on the long term. Same thing with Third Impact. I kind of put them along the same lines. I definitely want to highlight Dangerous here in this roster. He's a really strong support player. I meant to kind of highlight all the players that I wanted to make a little note on, but I kind of forgot, so I'll start now. But Dangerous, he's kind of got a, you know, I'll save that for the end. I'll kind of go through and talk about each player I want to highlight for each team. I'll save that for the end of after I get past Imperium. We'll talk about that later. But Third Impact, we'll focus on them for right now a little bit longer. I really like this roster because not only does Third Impact give me money, I'll just disclose that right now. Just for all of the people that are conflict of interest focused. I am a content creator for Third Impact. That just popped into my head, but I just want to get that out of the picture before I talk a little bit about them. But the reason I like them so much as well is I talked with Insane at one point. We got to talk about the roster and kind of the offseason as well. I like the fact that they're utilizing a analyst role, which I believe no other team is doing right now in Premier. So that's super cool to see them utilize that role, kind of as the only team so far that I've seen be able to, and even have a coach to back them up. A really good support system going on in this roster, and with an IGL like Insane, support player like Dane, very level-headed people, you'll be able to operate pretty well. I think that Walker, Grape, and Brett are also really talented mechanically, so should have a lot of success. But next up, Rebirth. I was unsure of this 6th and 7th spot. I think what really won me over for Third Impact going in place is that Rebirth is operating with Shaniak rather than 4-Pack, and I really did think that 4-Pack was such an influential player to Rebirth's roster. So that's kind of the reason I gave Third Impact the edge here. And Shaniak's still really talented, but I think that 4-Pack just did so much in the server. Every time I watched him, he was he was really good at multi-fragging. He added a lot. But all in all, this is a pretty impressive roster. I think that they'll do pretty good, and I think that the next really 3 teams, 7, 8, and 9, are kind of sleepers, because the fact that these 3 teams are even 7, 8, and 9 kind of blows my mind. Again, kind of a weird thing with the MDL rankings. It's going to be a little bit tricky. I definitely understand it. It's the first season. Seeding is super hard when that's the case. But I mean, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird that these 3 teams are even in that. I'm kind of like looking at the other side of the bracket, and you got a couple good teams, but yeah, this definitely seems like the stacked Premier team bracket. But besides that, yeah, that's the reason I basically gave Third Impact the edge as 4-Pack. Next up, we got Big Chillin', which is Monk, Braun, Micro, Frosty K, and then they got the coach. This roster, I talked a little bit with Micro about this video that's scheduled for 7 p.m. January 14th. That'll be coming out later today. It's an interesting roster. I'm really excited that Frosty K is kind of continuously IGLing for like young players like Monk and Braun and even Micro. I think that that'll be a valuable experience. I'm not sure how much success they'll be able to have in this season. I know that they're putting in the work. Also glad to see that Micro and Frosty K have some roster stability in the likes of Monk and Braun. Hopefully Frosty K's internet is good. I know there was some issues with that last season from our interview with Micro. So fingers crossed for that. But yeah, that's kind of the reason I put them at 8th. Is there's a lot of young players like Monk and Braun, and honestly, they both have had their own successes in MDL, which was good to see. I just need to kind of see this roster play out a little bit more. But next up, we got Hate's Chess Club, which is Hate, Nox, Rin, Johan, and Wilkie. We got a couple players from the old Imperium from last season of MDL in this roster. Rin, who I can't remember what team he played on last season, and then Nox and Hate, which is kind of the duo from I can't remember the team last season, but they're a good roster. again, I do just think this is a very difficult group, so I had to make some tough decisions. And this kind of came at like a first glance. I wasn't really expecting all of these teams. I was expecting it to be a little bit easier to decide just based on the teams that were playing. Um but yeah, the reason I kind of put them down lower is because last season they didn't have so much success, and it was just weird to see that roster play out. I think that now going into a fresh season, they might have some more luck, but yeah, I'm not sure what to expect from this team. I do want to. I'll talk about Wilkie a little bit later. I got high expectations for him, but we'll do that after. Lastly, Imperium. This is the move up from Advanced last season from MDL relegations. They were able to make it through. It's GSG9. They got signed to Imperium Esports, so congratulations to them. But with that being said, we got Valence, CZ, Sherps, J-Dubs, and Rise. Really excited to see this roster. Interesting to see Valence kind of make the move. He was previously on X Recon 5, which we'll go over in the next bracket because there's some interesting stuff going on there. But all in all, pretty strong roster. I'm excited to see them. I don't have high expectations for them. I'm not gonna lie. Like all of these other teams got have MDL experience, like a full roster of premier MDL experience. You've got such a difficult group here. So for the advanced move up, I'm not sure how they'll be able to compete, especially with the fact that they're kind of picking up new players here and there. But who knows? They might be able to put up some numbers, pull off some upsets. But yeah, that's all I've got for the rankings. I'll now highlight a couple of players on each team, or just one player for each team. But first off, with Triumph, I want to highlight Viz. The guy had a really impressive intro to last season of MDL. He played on Incognito, I believe for most of the season. He was on PVO for a while when he first got picked up, but had a really good season last season, and obviously has been experiencing a lot of success. I got a video talking a little bit more in depth about him coming out. It's with Micro. Micro touches on his kind of motivation last season. He's very highly motivated from what I've seen. So shout out to Viz. If he's on the roster, again, it's a big if. Not 100% sure if that's been announced yet. So just waiting on Triumph to say the word. At least just imagining off of the ESEA roster. Next up, we got High Coast. I kind of want to highlight. I'll do this while we go, but I kind of want to highlight Ponalone. Age clearly isn't a factor with this guy. He's still performing at a very high level. I've been watching him a little bit and playing in FPL, and it's really fun to watch him play. Watch him just like destroy these young players. It's a lot of fun. He did the same thing. He had a really good series versus Fury that kind of put Whalers on the map worldwide, and now they've got a really cool org from High Coast. So I'm so glad. I'm so glad that they got a roster or organization that wants to back them and help them and support this team. Cobra, I kind of touched on for Rugrats. He's had a really good last season as well. He kind of found his form when he moved from I believe he was playing on, I can't remember if it was Kinship or Virio Pro last season. One of those two teams. He played on a really rough team, and then moved to this Rugrats roster. He was playing with some very high caliber players like Fang, like Infinite, and then all of a sudden I felt like he just started turning up in the server and destroying people. He's the reason for a couple of their upsets, or at least a big factor in a couple of their upsets in like DreamHack Winter. So yeah, big shout out to Cobra. I expect high things from him this season. For Secret Club, I kind of want to highlight Classia and Civ. I talked about them earlier, but these two, they're young players. both came up from advanced 2 seasons ago or last season, and they're really impressive. Like mechanically, super talented. I expect them to bring that same energy in MDL. As for RBG, I want to highlight their Opper Wiz. The guy is. It seems like he can win rounds that should not be won very often. He's really good in clutch situations. And I feel like RBG's is a very slept on team just because the fact that when they were operating with their core 5, which now this isn't their core 5, but when they were operating with their core 5, they were taking down big teams, really talented teams. Like Chaos, they were taking maps off of them, like picking off maps from these top level teams here and there. So yeah, keep an eye out for RBG. As for Third Impact, I want to highlight Dane. I mentioned this earlier, but he's the one that reminded me I wanted to do this. But Dane, he's a really good support player that you kind of, if you're kind of operating in that support role, he's maybe a player that you want to keep an eye out for. He's so good at getting like multiple kills on like the CT side. He puts himself in really good positions to like multi-frag and just hold it down sights. So keep an eye out for him. I believe he's also a really good secondary op on Mirage. So that's a little side note that I remember from Advanced. For Rebirth, I want to highlight Inshaniak, not because necessarily he's the best on the roster, just mainly because he has a lot to prove this season. I read the Dust 2 article, and it seemed like 4-Pack's leave wasn't permanent. So that could be an interesting little note to keep in mind. So obviously Inshaniak trying to keep his spot on the roster possibly with this season, trying to keep his spot in MDL as he kind of was toughened through last season of Advanced with the X Thunder Logic team. Next up, Big Chillin'. You've got Monk and Braun, very impressive young fraggers on this team. So yeah, I mean I don't have much to say about this duo. I think that it kind of leaves a lot on Frosty K to kind of introduce them into Premier. They played a little bit last season, not too much, but enough to kind of dip their toes in. And now I want to see them perform at a high level. I kind of put Micro in that same bubble, but Micro has a little bit more experience, so I have high expectations for him too. Monk and Braun are the two I wanted to highlight. Next up we got Wilkie. Wilkie played for Imperium last season. He is kind of just nuts mechanically. I feel like I've heard many people talk about his mechanics. I honestly feel like I haven't seen it all that much myself, or at least noticed it. But sometimes I just miss things in my cast, so I'm kind of taking other people's words for this when I mention Wilkie here. And honestly, I believe them because I've heard multiple different people say that this guy is nuts. So, definitely a player to look out for. And then finally for Imperium Esports, I want to highlight J-Dubs. J-Dubs last season, between last season and season 34, which was 2 seasons ago, I saw a massive jump in form. So if he can continue to kind of grind it out, which I know he's been putting in a lot of work, if he can continue to put in that work, I've got real high expectations for him. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do with this roster. Hopefully my my last ranking was a mistake, and I'll learn from that. But that being said, that is all I have for Group A, and we will throw it over to Group B here now. So I'm back with part 2 of the rankings here. We're going to be doing Group B now, which is the group that could be a little bit less stacked than the other one here. So I'm going to just kick it off with Extra Salt. Obviously, I think would be everyone's first pick, at least until we see what the right opportunity or X Chaos is going to finish out their roster with. On top of that, not even sure if this the right opportunity roster is correct. But I think that it makes sense. PTR obviously joined recently, so imagine he'll still be playing. Vanity, I'm not even sure is playing this season, and then John G still on the roster. Obviously, Zeppa and Leaf exited as well, so not sure what this roster is going to look like. Imagine they're going to find players soon, and I think once they do find those last players, they will be able to be in that second spot once they finish out that roster. But starting off, I'm just going to talk about a little bit about Extra Salt, which now has OC, Monum, Fang, JT, and Sonic. Fang has recently rounded out this roster after a really nice season last season. I mentioned him earlier in the video. He played on X Recon 5 and is now playing on Extra Salt, which is a big upgrade. But he was one of the top players for X Recon 5. He had an insane rating compared to his teammates. He was always consistently dropping big numbers in every match. He did eventually move to Rugrats towards the end of the season, which that move didn't mean all that much. They didn't make playoffs, but he did. He played a little bit of the DreamHack Winter, I believe, with this roster, and they had a lot of success. They upset some pretty good teams, so Fang played a big role in that picture. So obviously, Extra Salt needs to be the number 1 seed here in this group number 2. I put again the right opportunity in number or group B. Sorry, for the rewind, not group 2, group B, but the right opportunity. I put them as number 2. I think they'll be able to round out a roster pretty strong. Again, I'm not even sure if Vanity is playing. I just imagine he will be playing if this is the sort of core that they're building, and the fact that like I'm pretty sure that ESEA has double checked with all of these teams to see if they're playing. But yeah, the right opportunity being number 2. Again, they're gonna round out their roster with some decent people. I think they'll have that availability. Whether that means that some of these players are gonna move, there's obviously Dumal left, yeah, but I mean, if that team's not playing in this season, then that could mean that there could open up spots for some of the players on to move into that roster as well, possibly Boo or something like that. That's just an idea, but that could be a possibility. But yeah, I imagine they'll be able to round out their roster. They have a pretty strong core right now. So moving on to Timberman. These were the kind of very impressive, very mechanically skilled core of Shane, Dare, Snav, and Kel. Unfortunately, during their playoff run, they weren't quite able to kind of make it because of an unfortunate event. I think there was a hurricane and that messed with the internet connection, and it was really sad to see that sort of thing happen towards the end of the season, because I actually really liked this team coming into it. They were kind of like a dark horse. They impressed me very much in their time playing. But now they finished off the roster adding Rec, which is a huge addition, a very positive addition in my opinion. Played on Secret Club formerly. It was the player I mentioned earlier in the video, and has a lot of MDL experience, a lot of now Premier experience, backing this roster up now with the addition of Rec. I think he's just another mechanically gifted player to add to the roster, and so with that reason, I think they're gonna be able to take the 3rd seed, which in this bracket is quite an accomplishment. You got to overcome Mythic, who is running pretty closely behind them. Which that roster is going to be Flom, Davey, Adrin, Katie, and then lastly, unsure of who that last player is going to be. That still hasn't been announced just yet. I imagine that'll be announced soon. I know they're using a. You know what? Now that I look at their ESEA page, it could be ZNF. I'm gonna throw ZNF on there because I think whether he's a sub or not, but I'll just throw him on there. So that doesn't change my rankings, and yeah, I think they'll still be just right behind Timmerman and that kind of top four, kind of separated from the rest of the pack. But moving on to Russian Canadians, this team made playoffs last season. I won't even go into that whole mess, but they had a really impressive season last season, despite kind of having trouble finding a strong core. They played with Wolfie for a game, I believe, before getting rid of him. For I'm not sure exactly why, but they have introduced Melio, which I'm excited to see. KMZ as well, I believe, is a new addition. But I do think they'll kind of be in the middle of the pack in this, just because there's not that much competition in this roster or in this group B. You can kind of see that after the first four teams, I guess you can consider maybe the first six teams. From there on out, it kind of the competition gets pretty light. But I thought that Russian Canadians could just edge out on Eclipse. I do think that these two will be a decent bit of competition between the Russian Canadians and Eclipse. It'll be like a decent rivalry because I do think that the top four and the bottom four are kind of locked in. Maybe not in this exact order, but definitely like the teams will be the same. Depending on Recon 5, of course. I'm not sure what is going on with that roster. No idea. I'll get to that later. Moving on to Eclipse, we got Droid, Nero, Zeptic, John, and Robbie. This roster is a roster I know very little about. I watched a little bit of their games. Some of them at times, or sometimes they impressed me, and sometimes they fell short to some teams they should have definitely beaten. I think that kind of comes from a lack of maybe practice from them last season. It did kind of look like they were having fun, kind of pugging it out, not necessarily putting in the work. I could be wrong in saying that. That's kind of an assumption just from their like play style from last season, a couple of the casts that I did of that team, and kind of the results with what players they're working with. They've got a lot of MDL experience, yet they lost to a couple teams they probably shouldn't have. But being in this group, I think that they'll have a good opportunity to once again kind of impress. But I don't really have much to say about this roster other than I think they'll come in at a solid sixth to start the season off. Next up, we've got SKDC. This team I kind of have high expectations for. I just realized that this isn't right, but I'll fix that later. I have high expectations for just because watching them in playoffs, they did a really good job of kind of taking down some tough opponents. I believe I can't remember quite what happened, but they did a good job playing Rise. I think they fell short in beating them, but they have a really good core with experience combined with like young talent, and I'll get to this later, but Hiki is one of the players that I'm looking forward to making the introduction into Premier. That's one of the reasons I'm most excited about SKDC being back in MDL or Premier rather. Along with side Ocean, of course, Ocean getting back in MDL is fun to see. Did not mean to switch to Twitter. But yeah, it's exciting to see. But now I'm gonna fix this, which GGPR. I guess I'll just like check HLTV and fix it. But GGPR I know is playing with George Snorts, Lowrider, 3 Arc, Yuz, and Creed, which is their roster. So, not much to say about these bottom kind of or 7th through 9th because they're all teams that I kind of watched from advance. I hate that I kind of rated these guys all in the same category of kind of towards the bottom. But just considering the fact that like they're the teams that just don't play in or have not yet played in Premier, so they're gonna have a little bit of a tough time possibly adjusting. Obviously, some of these teams have been able to take down MDL teams previously, but you never know what could happen. Obviously with these rosters kind of panning out, but it's a good roster. The only issue I see, and honestly, I could imagine myself putting Rise, although I don't know how strong they are. I could imagine putting Rise in place of GGPR and actually moving the two, just because they lost one of their most solid, most mechanically skilled players, which I'm sure they were able to kind of utilize in a strong fashion. So, with that being said, I threw them in at 8th. I think that they'll do good enough in this bracket, but they still got some roster stuff that they need to sort out. Not necessarily roster stuff. And their coach is Ninja. I also need to put in there. I won't forget you, Ninja. Don't worry. There you go. But next up we got Rise Esports Club. We've got Aiden, Demorin, Saturn, Consti, and Fidali, which this roster is very good. They did the new introduction to Premier. The reason I kind of put them above Recon 5 is obviously because only one player, I believe, has been announced on Recon 5. I could be wrong on that. There could be more. I probably should check Jet's Twitter, but right now, that's all of the roster I know. I know Fugly's still on the roster, and I believe they have to have one more player actively playing with them from last season or maybe a couple seasons ago. I'm not 100% sure. There's a possibility of Neptune coming back. He's kind of a free agent in Valorant, and maybe if he wants to come back to CS, that could be a possibility. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Fugly or Daryl, one of the two can come back. I think Daryl's eligible. I think he played enough games last season, but stuff to remember. But that's X Recon 5 from last season, kind of rebuilding with Jet, which is an interesting prospect. X Recon 5 wasn't a team that I really paid it. I mean, I did pay a lot of attention to last season. I casted a lot, but they never really. I mean, every time I watched them, it was a little bit disappointing to kind of see them lose to some teams. Obviously, there was. I don't know. I don't know what the issues exactly were behind it. I think maybe it was kind of a for fun team last season. Not a lot of practice going into it. I feel like Valence kind of needs to operate in a structure that might have more practice to kind of enable like his knowledge. So that might be a case where teams kind of struggle in that scenario. And then finishing things off, obviously, yeah, we got. Sorry, it just totally blanked, but yeah, I mean that's pretty much all there is for the teams and the seedings. I'm sure that we'll kind of see how things pan out. But yeah, let me know if you all have any opinions on what should be changed, what you think is good. I actually really enjoyed making this list. It was tough to make. It would have been a lot harder if I did try to do a top 20, which I was thinking about doing. But once the groups came out, I was like, this is a perfect opportunity. But now I'm going to run over the players, kind of to highlight. For Extra Salt, I want to highlight Fang. Obviously, new player. Kind of dipping his toes in Tier 1. I think he's like 19 years old or something. If the HLTV page is right. So he's a young player. Has a lot of potential, especially now introduced into that Tier 1 team with a Tier 1, or at least Tier 1 backdoor. I'm not 100% sure what Extra Salt is exactly, but has a strong backing now, and I think he'll be able to kind of rise through the rankings. Right opportunity, I really don't know. I mean, maybe PTR to kind of see him play again would be fun, but I'm not too sure about this roster. Obviously, I don't even know if PTR is playing for sure. But might be a fun to watch that the PTR come back and play for a little bit and see how he does. Timberman, I definitely want to highlight Shane though. Shane is another sort of player like Dane Joris from the other bracket, where I like to highlight more of his anchoring. His a lot of times I think he plays B on, at least I know, Train. I'm not sure if there's any other maps, but he has some of the most impressive anchoring I've seen in Premiere, probably. Definitely in Advanced, where I kind of got introduced to Shane, but definitely one of the players I would like to like. I love to watch, and I like to see like people try and execute on him, because somehow he just always manages to hold his sight and, like, get a couple of kills in the process. And that's a very hard job to have. So huge shout out to Shane. As for Mythic, I think the obvious answer is KD. Absolutely nuts at hitting shots, mechanically gifted, super fun to watch. So highlighted KD for this one. Russian Canadians, I really don't know. Same with Eclipse. I feel like I don't know enough about these two teams to kind of give you a good answer on who to watch out for. But SKDC, you're gonna want to look out for Hiki and Sensu, the two young players, rocking with the older players with experience. I mean, obviously Semphis is gonna have some fun as well. He's had some fun in Advanced last season, but those two you definitely want to keep an eye out for, because it's Ocean's team, and Ocean's team is notorious for kind of developing talent. So these two definitely keep an eye out for. GGPR, I kind of want to highlight Lowrider and Ninja. They are the IGL and coach for these two teams. So keep an eye out for them. They're gonna have to lead a lot of young players to success, I believe. At least I know Yuz and Creed, I'm pretty sure, and George Snorts maybe are pretty young. So obviously it kind of puts a little bit of responsibility on the more experienced players there. As for this roster, I'm not 100% sure. Saturn, he kind of made his introduction into MDL last season. We got to see him play a couple of games. He was fun to watch, and maybe even Fideli, who is super clutch, and had a pretty good playoff series from last season. And I guess Jet, obviously, as that is the only player that I know that's coming back from Recon 5. But for that, I mean, that's pretty much kind of the players I want to highlight. Again, I want you all to make note that not all of these rosters are 100% confirmed. Some of them definitely not confirmed at all. I'm just kind of assuming based on ESEA rosters, and that's not always the way to go. But that's what I wanted to do for this video. I wanted to get this out pretty soon after the groups got put out. I was planning on this for quite some time. And again, this is something I'm going to be updating throughout the season. I might make it a Friday thing. I might make it a weekend thing. Whenever the games are finishing up, I'll try and record one of these. I'll talk about the games. I'll talk about a little bit about the games. I'll update the scores. You see on the Excel that you can. The records will be right here. And then I think as these teams move on, I'll kind of say I'll change this to like comments. That's what it was originally. And you can, I'll put some notes in. But yeah, these rankings are super easy to change, and I'll be keeping them updated for you all and posting videos as Premier League goes on. But with that being said, that's all I have for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all soon. Peace.